Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports. Coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the number one network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the number one sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, and London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe, and China. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south, in the land of the free and the home of the brave, on a beautiful November the 6th, 2019. Brando Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Charlton, I thought I had a little bit of whiplash. I sit up last night, and all of a sudden I saw a couple of college football games on, and I was thinking that we'd already gotten to the weekend. Then I sit back and realize college football now is being played 5 nights a week, so they're only taking off Sunday and Monday because Kent State and Toledo and Ball State and Western Michigan played 2 heck of a games last night.
Isn't it amazing? I thought kids went to school, they went to college to go to school, but I think some schools, they go to college to play football. It's amazing when you can find games that are happening on Tuesday. I thought the same thing, Big C. A lot of things happening in the world of the NBA. NFL is always big, and then good old boys are getting together around that with that bucket of moonshine, deciding which SEC. How can they get 3 SEC teams into the Final Four for college football? We're just trying to get one from the West Coast, Big C. We'll see how well that works out. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. When you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. And everybody knows when you think about buying a new vehicle, you got to go out and tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. I want to say Big C Sports brought to you by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast, and you'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. Also, Big C Sports, you can find us on Xfinity, Comcast Television, also launching on Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and smart TVs all over the universe. I want to give out this military hotline number for National Suicide Number. I know a lot of programs are doing different broadcastments for military days and Veterans Days, celebrating all the branches of the military. But I know you've been doing this for a long time, Big C. That National Suicide Hotline number, 800-273-8255, 800-273-8255, or text 838-255. That's 838-255. Why is that so important to you, Big C?
Well, Charlton, our military veterans are important to everyone, not just me. They're an integral part of the history of this great country, Charlton, but we also have to make them an integral part of the health and welfare of the service of our country, Charlton, to reach a hand out to these great individuals on a daily basis, not just think about them during some proposed holiday that's been set up for the military. They're military people, Charlton, 365 days out of the year, whether they're active or inactive duty or retired, Charlton. We are stacked right now with such a wealth of sports going on in America, so it's great detractors going around all the time, but we have a tendency to forget about people who might be struggling emotionally, financially, Charlton, in this country. And a lot of those people are retired military and military veterans, Charlton. So we have to make it a focus to keep an eye on these people, to lend a hand, and 800, suicide prevention number that we constantly give out nightly on our broadcast, Charlton, is one of those lifelines that's been set out there, not just for military veterans, Charlton, but also the layman, everyday person in society. Suicide is such a horrific disease that goes on in America daily, Charlton, and people don't like to address it because they think of it as an embarrassment. You got to think about it more as saving somebody's life, preventing this horrific disease from, manifesting itself. So if you know of somebody in trouble, you're even thinking somebody might be contemplating just any ill feelings about themselves, don't hesitate in giving out the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number.
That's 800-273-8255, 800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255, that's 838-255, and get some help. We have Veterans Day coming up on November the 11th, which is Monday, and you'll see a lot of sports programming. They started this week, and they're doing things with military, servicemen and women, letting them know that we have such gratitude for them But after Monday, you may hear something Tuesday, and then you won't hear anything. It just goes away. It's almost as if we'll celebrate you and give our thoughts and prayers on specific dates if it's marked on the calendar. But people need help every day, and that's why I love honoring and paying homage to our military veterans, Big C. I do want to say that everybody right now, especially in the world of college football, there's this thought of selecting the top teams in the country. And I know rankings come out by this oligarchy of people that decide who's number 1, who's number 2, 3, and 4. But I don't feel bad for them. But I look at a program like Clemson. I don't think they've lost a game in 2 years, Big C. How do they get dumped when we have teams ranked above them? I mean, it's not based on what you did last year, but give me your thought. You bump a team that's defending national champions, hasn't lost in 2 years, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you look at the bowl selection committee, it's about the eye test. They're looking at strength of schedule. What has the team done in this current season versus the last season? We could say the same thing about the NFL and the New England Patriots. They have not been back to the Super Bowl, and no one else has been there since they've won it.
Yeah.
But they're still not considered the best team in the NFL, even with one loss on their record. So as I look at this slate with Clemson and even the bowl selection committee making their choices, they make them too soon. We still have a month to go in the college football season. A lot of these statues will weigh itself out over the next couple of weeks, and even starting this weekend. We got Penn State facing a formidable foe in Minnesota. You have Alabama and LSU. So that's 3 of the teams in the top 4, Charlton, that are going to be facing off this week. And at least one of those teams will have a loss after this. So they will automatically move out of the top 4.
Yeah, and when you look at a program like Minnesota, the Gophers, they're also undefeated. So how do you tell them that they're not even in the top 4 or 5? But it's all fair in love and war. It is the eyeball test. But more than the eyeball test, we have this thing in the world of sports where if you know the right people, Big C, and who you're connected to, and you have this always being one of the teams in contention, that's showing up too. I think the solution, and I know we talked about it before, and sometimes people say, well, you can't keep playing games. We'll have 18 games. But if you had 2 teams that could sit aside 1 and 2, have 6 teams overall. And have the top 2 teams get a bye week, like what the NFL does. I mean, and then you're going to have teams 7 and 8 complaining about the same thing, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, but you're still punishing kids and you're rewarding kids. You're telling kids because they're ranked higher, and it's an eyeball test. Well, if all 4 of those teams or 6 of those teams are undefeated, how do you clarify who's number 1 and number 2 at that point? So you reward people based on popularity who would become 1 and 2, and you punish those who are not 1 and 2. If you look at the bowl selection committee, Charlton, and what they did, the top 4 teams that they have ranked, Ohio State, LSU, Alabama, and Penn State, all 4 of those teams have stadiums in excess of 100,000 fans that attend their home games. That's one of the criteria that they looked at also, is that they have a great fan following. If they were all to remain undefeated, is that they would all travel well to neutral sites to have stands full. If you go back to the Pac-12 championship game last year that was in Santa Clara, I believe it was.
Yeah, Santa Clara.
And they had roughly 35,000 people in that game.
If that.
Versus if you go to the SEC championship game, which they held in Atlanta last year, and I believe they had a packed house of 79,000 in that game. So these are the things that they look at, and even the Big Ten championship that they have in Indianapolis. That stadium is packed with 75,000 for that game. These are some of the criteria that the college football playoff system looks at. It's great to say, okay, we're going to get more teams in, but if you look at some of those anemic, attendance that some of these teams have west of the Mississippi, are they going to travel well and fill up an opposing stadium, Chuck?
And I've thought that many times, and we've talked about at some point in time, you got to regionalize the fan interest also. A lot like the Los Angeles Chargers, when there's talk about they're not going to London. I mean, other than one weekend maybe, but they're not going to London. They're going to go to L.A. because of the TV money. They couldn't care less if they had 5,000 people show up. They still get that TV revenue, and people got to understand that. College football is a thing I've always proposed, at least over the last maybe 6 or 7 years, for the Pac-12 commissioner to pick the home team from the north or south and let them host that championship game That way you have the local fan base show up. They're not going to travel on an airplane a 2-hour flight if you're coming from Utah to pack the stadium out in San Francisco or from Seattle, Washington. It just hasn't seemed to be the case. But I want to get your thoughts on the SEC's, I guess, best chance for getting 2 teams into the college football playoffs. And it's going to pan out coming up this weekend with Alabama and LSU. But all of the hype, the hoopla over this game, I think Alabama shut them out last year at 29-0. That was in Baton Rouge. And I don't think they've scored more than a touchdown on Alabama in the last 2 times they've played. So give me your scenario for the top, at least the SEC getting 2 teams. And they seem to always get that, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you look at that game this weekend, Charlton, you got the best 2 rated quarterbacks in college football playing, Tua and Burrow. They rate 1 and 2 statistically up and down the ledger in college football. This is the first time in an SEC game that this has ever happened. And when you look at this, Charlton, both teams are undefeated. If LSU goes on and wins this game, Charlton, and then runs the table and wins the SEC championship, that means they get that automatic berth.
Yeah.
But if they lose that game, Charlton, and Alabama continues on through, then they're going to get that automatic berth, and LSU could possibly get an outside looking in because of the strength of schedule.
Yeah.
They've had 4 teams ranked in the top 25 on their schedule thus far, Charlton.
Yeah.
And they still have a couple games to play. So when you look at strength of schedule, LSU amongst all the teams in the top 4 has the most strength of schedule. But if Alabama loses, Charlton, and, they got in and they won the championship back in 2007 when they lost it. They didn't even compete for the SEC championship. They were knocked out earlier by Auburn.
Yeah.
But this is the chance. If this scenario happens again, I don't see the committee giving Alabama that automatic berth because of strength of schedule. They really don't have any signature wins on their record, even though they have to play Auburn, and by that time Auburn can be out of the top 25.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why they left them in the polls. But this is a scenario I think this is a game that's going to live up to all the hype with the great athletes that they have on both sides of the field. Both teams probably have 2 of the top 3 receiving corps in the country to go along with those top 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
We know both of these programs have always played outstanding defense. But the winner of this game, I figure, has an automatic shoe-in to the bowl championship.
A team that's been just at the caboose of trying to get into the national championship bracket, or at least winning that game, Georgia. So just some thinking again, and you may have already touched on it, but I want to just follow up Georgia. They were just complaining last year that they did not get out. They had the chance to go down to the Sugar Bowl, and they lost to Texas by 2 touchdowns, actually, to Texas. And so they had their chances this year. South Carolina's a blemish. They had a nice win over Notre Dame. But if Georgia wins out beating LSU, if it's LSU in the SEC title game, that would leave both teams at 12-1. And just think about it. Georgia would have to have at least 2 top 10 teams. Notre Dame, Florida, LSU would have 4 wins. I think LSU beat Texas on the road. We know they jumped on Florida this year, beat Auburn. And if they can beat Alabama, which I don't think they will, to me, and again, I'm on the West Coast, Big C. You're down south, so you might have a different flavor about it. But all the talk about LSU being better this year, they have never shown that they could match Alabama physically. People keep making about the quarterbacks, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they've always shown that they can match them physically. The difference has always been at quarterback. If you look at Alabama over the last year, quarterback that they've had Jalen Hurts at quarterback a couple of years. Now they've had 2 at quarterback for the past couple of years, Charlton. That's been the difference between Alabama and LSU. LSU has always been as physically talented as a team that you will ever see across the country over the last decade. They've always have never been able to recruit a quarterback. They really didn't even recruit Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
He transferred in to run this spread offense that they have. You think about the receiving corps that they have at LSU right now. This is the best receiving corps since they had Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. Both of these receivers will have 1,000 yards receiving when the season is over. That's something that's never been done at LSU.
Yeah.
So that brings a different slate to the offense at LSU. They always had a strong running back, and they still have that again this year. That offensive line is a mountain in front of Joe Burrow, and so he's been able to work his moxie behind this group, Charlton.
Yeah.
And you think about Joe Burrow. This guy is completing 79% of his passes on the season. He's on pace to set the NCAA record for pass completions, and we're talking about an SEC quarterback.
Yeah.
This has not been a conference that's been known over the years for throwing the football, but as I said, they have 2 of the top-rated quarterbacks in the country playing in this conference.
And see, this thing that they match up, how do they match up if they got shut out? That's more than just a quarterback difference. And that's about being dominated. They couldn't even score against, and they were at home last year against Alabama. I think a lot of that, if it's psychological or physical, is something when you haven't scored against a team in 2 years and all of a sudden you're supposed to beat them. So let me take Alabama's point of view. And again, everybody has their own opinion about it. They went out, they're in the finals, period. If they lose, you think they're going to beat Georgia if they went out in the SEC title game, and that would leave Alabama undefeated, bound at 11-1 LSU for second place. But Alabama, they've been, I think, Nick Saban has 6 championships now, Big C, even though they didn't all come at Alabama. But there's something about him. He's like Belichick when it comes to championship games. Other than the stain of losing to Clemson last year, that was in Santa Clara, and it just got out of hand. It's not because they were outcoached. It was just that one game where they played horrible football, and Tua wasn't really 100%. But I think psychologically, I think Alabama's in the head of LSU. Would you agree with that or no, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's easy to say that. I mean, it's just like when you made the point in your opening that Texas beat Georgia down in the Sugar Bowl last year.
Yeah.
What's Texas' record this year and what's Georgia's record this year, Charlton? And so it's two totally different things. Well, when you look at Clemson beating Alabama the last 2 out of the last 3 years in championship competition, Charlton, what was the difference in that? A throwing quarterback. That's something that Alabama had not faced on a regular basis, even in their own conference.
Yeah.
Now, when you're looking at Joe Burrow, he has better numbers than what Trevor Lawrence had last year at Clemson. His receivers are better than the receivers that Trevor Lawrence had at Clemson last year. One of the things you got to look at with LSU is that they've always brought the physicality defensive-wise.
Yeah.
Alabama's a team that's down this year. They don't run the ball as well as they've had run the ball in the past. They've been a pass-reliant offense. So if they struggle throwing the ball just as they did in the national championship game against Clemson last year, they had no way to stem the tide. You knew that they were going to throw the ball. You could drop 7 in coverage, and it made it easy picking for the secondary of Alabama. Tua is just as vulnerable as any quarterback in the country. Well, he's not used to playing from behind.
Yeah.
And he got behind last year against Clemson.
Yeah.
But what Clemson did was Clemson took a page from what Oklahoma had done in the second half down in the Orange Bowl against Alabama. So both of those teams exposed the vulnerability that Alabama possesses. And that's the strength right now of LSU, is the weakness that Alabama possesses.
Let me get your thoughts on a team up north. There's 2 teams I want to look at, really. If you look at Clemson, that's not in the top 4 right now in this poll. And then Ohio State, which is number 1 in this poll. When Ohio State got in there, they didn't start the Bowl Championship Series ranked number in the top 4, but they got in, and they ended up beating Oregon that year for the national championship. Which team is more appealing to you? Let's just say SEC gets 2 teams. Whoever it happens to be, let's just say for numbers, if Alabama and LSU somehow wind up back in that bracket when they pick the teams. And then you have Ohio State, which most likely will run the table in the Big Ten, even though they still have some undefeated teams in there to deal with, Penn State and also Minnesota. But let's say they run the table. What would you look at Clemson being placed over, say, a team that, like Ohio State, as far as bracketing, would you put them over Ohio State? Because they haven't done anything to lose. Would that make any sense, your thoughts?
Well, if Clemson wins out, they're automatically in. It handles itself. And that's one of the things I always say about why do you put this poll out with a month to go still in the season?
Yeah.
And you bracketed the top 6 teams, Charlton, to automatically get 4 of those teams in.
Yeah.
If you look at it, they're going to have to compete against each other. Clemson has one tough opponent left. That's Wake Forest. They're in their own division, Charlton. They win that game, they automatically win the ACC championship.
Yep.
Wake Forest is their only challenge with 1 loss, and they're in the same division of the ACC as Clemson is. When I look at Ohio State, yes, they still have to play Penn State. That's always been a tough game for the Buckeyes playing the Nittany Lions.
Yeah.
But both of those teams potentially could be undefeated, or Penn State could suffer its first loss this weekend.
Yeah.
So that will handle itself when Ohio State has to play. But when I look at Ohio State physically, they're a much better team right now than what they were last year. And they were a team that went 13-1 last season.
Yeah.
I think they upgraded at quarterback with Justin Fields. We knew of the accolades that Dwayne Haskins had last year. But now they have a complete running game to complement the passing game. You have Fields, who was very mobile, and Haskins wasn't.
Yeah.
A.J. Dobbs is the dominant running back. Their defensive line is just as good as advertised. They always have one of the best secondaries in the country. So if we look at pure athleticism, Charlton, I honestly see both Clemson and Ohio State at this point making that bowl championship series, just based on what they have personnel.
Yeah.
I like LSU being in there also. And then it's a toss-up whether the SEC will get two teams in. I think when we look at the West Coast, we're looking at the odd guys looking out. We're looking at Oregon and Utah playing each other. But when you look at both of those teams, if Oregon wins, not Oregon, but if Utah wins, the knocker on them is going to be they lost to USC.
Yeah.
If Oregon wins, the knocker is going to be that they lost to Auburn, and Auburn won't be in the top 25 come the Final Four.
Yeah, so it makes it mostly those teams that we talked about that are going to get in, ring around the rosies. There's only so many chairs for musical chairs. We wish everybody nothing but the best. It is good conversation to have, especially if you're in the top 4 teams. I want to just take a look at the other side of the universe. I want to bring up the bottom 10, Big C's bottom 10 college football. And again, everybody looks at the guy who crosses the finish line first. But these programs, at one time or another, they have been winners. I look at number 10, UNLV. They're 2-7, Big C. And then I look at number 9, Vanderbilt. They're 2-6 on the season. The team that shocks me is Arkansas. They're 2-7 on the season, but they're still. I remember they won an SEC championship, way back in the day. You're going back 2 decades, but they've always been able to recruit. Then Rutgers, they're at 2-7. Georgia Tech changed their whole offense, and they're 2-6. Maybe they'll change it back by kickoff next year. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you look at Georgia Tech, they changed the scheme because Paul Johnson retired as the head coach. They brought in a new coach, Collins, and he went to the pro-style offense.
Yep.
And it takes a while to change that type of scheme with the player personnel that they had. It would be like taking Army, Navy, or Air Force and say, okay, all of a sudden now we're going to run a pro-style offense, and we have undersized linemen and players and have lack of skilled position players. And so it's going to be a while for that transition to take place at Georgia Tech. Give them another 2 years to be competitive.
I agree with that. And then also Northwestern, they really fallen hard. They're 1-7 on the season. They were tough to win last year up in the Big Ten. UTEP, University, Texas El Paso, they're 1-9, one of the best stadiums, I think, in the college world football. And then UMass, 1-8. I don't know why. I mean, they're in the Northeast. You have some really good high school football programs, but it hasn't carried over to UMass at this time. And then you have Mexico State. New Mexico State 0-8 on the season. And then the Rice Owls 0-9. They're down in the heart of Texas, but they're not getting any of the big-time talent. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you think about that, you got Rice and UTEP right down there in Texas, Charlton. And if you look at Texas football overall, other than Baylor, it's down. The University of Texas, University of Houston, we've seen struggles in those programs, so it's understandable that Rice and UTEP would struggle also.
Yeah, it's just amazing. You can't fill up every stadium no matter where you go. There's a lot of talk about how the stadiums are really full all over the country, but that's not the case at all. Even in places like Texas where football is crazy, a lot of people having some challenges with that. But let me get on your thoughts, because Week 11, college football, it will be movement day, Big C, for the college football playoffs. And we can all talk about the top 4, whether it's Ohio State, if it's Alabama, LSU, or even Clemson, or whoever else they want to put up there. But number 4, Penn State, they're 8-0, and they're playing at 8-0 Minnesota. Minnesota's the darling of college football, but especially the darling of the Big Ten Conference. And because they're at home, it would not be an upset if Penn State fell, even though I think Penn State's a better team. Your thoughts?
Well, Minnesota's 8-0 for the first time since 1941. And this is the most meaningful game that they've had there since great Tony Dungy was playing quarterback at Minnesota, Charlton, back in the 70s before he became a defensive back in the NFL. He was a quarterback for the Golden Gophers in Minnesota.
Yeah.
But to be 8-0, P.J. Flick in the third year in this program has really done a marvelous job of turning around the Golden Gophers. Just like James Franklin at Penn State. You think about the horrific situation that Nittany Lion program was in, Charlton, almost a decade ago with all the scandals that they had in that program. But the players weren't involved in that.
No.
And the players and the new coaching staff have rebuilt this program to national prominence. And it's great to see that, it didn't affect the longevity of this university as far as getting back on top, just like we saw with SMU being undefeated until last week. But this is for, the supremacy in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
The winner of this game, Charlton, will have a head-up battle against Ohio State for the Big Ten title.
Yeah, and that really bolsters Ohio State's chances, too, is keeping that top ranking. Again, it depends on how they play week to week. Again, we've talked about LSU and Alabama. You look at number 2, LSU 8-0 versus number 3, Alabama 8-0. Nick Saban is amazing. Nick says, how did we drop a game? We didn't even play it. Is Nick upset about that? Maybe they did not care at all. Your thoughts?
Well, Nick is not thinking about this at all. I mean, he's a perfect car salesman when it comes to, working the media for a game, Charlton. He never says that his team is ready.
Yeah.
He never says that they're overconfident. He said, he hopes to be able to play against a great opponent. They're going to present many opportunities and problems for them.
Yeah.
So this is one of those games, Charlton, that I hope that this game is all that has been advertised. And it's very rare that during the season you get the number 1 and the number 2 teams playing each other.
Yeah.
So this is must-see. And I think if there's only one problem that may occur, if you remember the last time that Donald Trump showed up at a ball game, the home team lost.
Right.
So I think they might be, wondering, wishing that he does not show up at Tuscaloosa, because he has said he's going to come down there because he got booed in Washington, and he knows that the people that are NASCAR fans are going to be at the Alabama game, and they may cheer him on.
Yeah, well, we know Botus has his own things going on in his own world, Big Z. I love what's happening with football. I still think of the progress. Progress is always going to happen with people disagreeing. And when people disagree, that's good for conversation. If everybody agreed on everything, there'd be nothing great to talk about, Big C. But I go back to the college football polls. I remember, and I think it was back in the early 80s or late 70s, Arizona State, they finished tied with Florida State for number 1 in the country. I believe so, back at that far. And now we actually went through that era where we started choosing teams. And I know Washington and Miami, they were both chosen number 1 in different polls. I think that was 91 season, somewhere in there. And Washington went to the Rose Bowl, beat Michigan. Miami went to the Orange Bowl, beat Nebraska, and they split the national championship. So now we have this imperfect system, but it is great talking about it. I still think we're going to get to the point where we have 6 teams, and you have 2 teams that get a bye. But that's just my opinion. There's so much money in college football. We're going to take what's called the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the world of the NFL, also what's going on in the world of basketball. We'll take that Big C timeout. We'll come back in a moment, and we hope that you'll come back and join us as well. All right, we are back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. And you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all over the universe on the number 1 podcast network in the universe. That's iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com. Also, you can follow Big C Sports. My favorite apps are Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic. He'll do his thing, and I really appreciate the way things are going. Also, follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast Television, launching on Roku TV, Fire TV, Amazon TV, and so many other smart TVs all over the universe. I want to jump in to Big C's top 5 receivers in the NFL. I know we're at the midway point, but this could do a lot of good for the teams. And it's just amazing when players start separating themselves. I want to think about a guy named Michael Thomas. I remember he had contract issues earlier in the season, but the New Orleans receptions, think about this guy. 73 receptions, 875 yards, 4 touchdowns, and the team is 7-1, and he caught a lot of those passes from Teddy Bridgewater. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Michael Thomas has been the most consistent receiver in the NFL over the last 4 years. He got that big off-season contract, and the Saints rewarded him with all that money, and he keeps rewarding on the field. Normally when we see a player get an absorbent contract, their numbers tend to drop off. But now with Michael Thomas, Charlton, without him, the New Orleans Saints wouldn't have a receiving corps because you can only count on Ted Ginn maybe once or twice a game. But Michael Thomas is like clockwork. He's going to be right all the time.
Big C, who does he remind you, looking at the history of NFL receivers and Of course, everybody talks about the touchdown leader, Jerry Rice. Even though Jerry Rice had the most touchdowns, I don't think Jerry was the most explosive receiver. I still think that's Randy Moss. But who does Thomas remind you of thinking about the history of the NFL, Big C?
Well, when I look at what Michael Thomas does, Shelton, he's a mixture of a lot of receivers. He's a lot like Chris Carter, who played with the Minnesota Vikings and Philadelphia Eagles, Shelton, as far as his ability to get open and catch the ball. He's not going to take the top off of a defense, but that's who he reminds me of more than anybody. He's fearless going across the middle.
He's a very dominant receiver. DeAndre Hopkins for the Houston Texans, 68 receptions, 665 yards, 4 touchdowns, and his team is 6-3. And when you have Watson as a quarterback, you're always going to get an extra step or two because he's going to run you open. He's not going to sit in the pocket and get sacked, Big C. He can run out of the pocket, and he's still just as accurate. Your thoughts?
Well, Hopkins has always been a great receiver since coming out of the University of Clemson. And as long as Deshaun Watson is healthy, he's one of the most feared receivers in the NFL. And he's one of the key catalysts in that Houston offense, Charlton. He was the second leading receiver in the NFL this last year, and he's right back up there in the top 10 again.
Who would you compare Hopkins with throughout the history of the NFL? Who does he make you think, you know what, he reminds me of that guy, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, when I think about Hopkins and the speed that he has, a lot of people underrated speed. He reminds me a lot of the late Cliff Branch, who played with the Oakland Raiders. Here's a guy that throughout his career, Charlton, averaged 20 yards reception. He's not in the NFL Hall of Fame where he should be because he also has 3 Super Bowl rings. But Hopkins reminds me a lot of Cliff Branch.
I would second that, and amazing how great the late Cliff Branch was. Big C, Julian Edelman for the New England Patriots, 63 receptions, 663 yards, 4 touchdowns, and the Patriots are 8-1, dropping that game at Baltimore. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the fastest. If you contrast who Tom Brady has had the chance to throw to over the years, from Randy Moss to Julian Edelman, I know Randy Moss is the more dominant athlete, but when you need a guy to get a first down, Julian Edelman, he's one of those guys, Big C. Your thoughts? I think we're having a little bit of static with the microphone, Big C. Go right ahead.
And it translated very well into the NFL, Charlton, but he's the straw that stirs the break far as the Patriots receiver. He's been the one constant for Tom Brady. He's fearless. He'll catch it inside, outside, Charlton. He doesn't have the speed to run away from everybody, but he also reminds me of a former Patriot that they had in Wes Welker, a lot of the similar characteristics.
Yeah, a lot of those, you don't have to be 6'5", 6'6" to get downfield. You can be a smaller guy. If you can catch the ball and run routes, and that's what he does. I want to go to a guy up in Seattle, Washington, where Russell Wilson's throwing to. That's Tyler Lockett for Seattle. 59 receptions, 767 yards, has 6 touchdowns, and the Seahawks are 7-2. And it's amazing. I could understand them losing the game at home to Baltimore. I know the game that they lost at home to the New Orleans Saints was more because special teams errors and mistakes and miscues, Big C. So give me your thoughts on how this duo with Wilson and Lockett will carry them, especially coming up against the Niners that's coming up. Big C, your thoughts?
Lockett might be the most underrated receiver in all the NFL. When you look at the acrobatic catches that he constantly makes, and he and Russell Wilson are in such fine tune with each other. We think about all the players that have gone in and out of Seattle over the past several years. Tyler Lockett has been the one consistent for Russell Wilson. As I look at his uncanny ability to get open and find that soft spot in the defenses, and Russell was always hitting him with that perfect pass. I go back to an old school receiver that he reminds me a lot of, Mike Renfro, who used to play with the Houston Oilers back in the 70s. They're a lot alike in their ability to get open.
Well, that's very good. And you have a great quarterback trying to get in the ball, a lot like any quarterback that can run and buy your time. That's what you get with Russell Wilson. It's just amazing when you think about this next player, Travis Kelce. He's for the Kansas City Chiefs, 49 receptions, 666 yards. And you think about, 2 touchdowns. The team record is 6-3. Patrick Mahomes has been sidelined with an injury. But at the same time, Kelce, he's a guy that can get run after the catch. And to me, I keep thinking Kellen Winslow when I watch him catch and run, even Tony Gonzalez. But give me your thoughts on Kelce.
Well, Kelce is uncanny right now as a tight end in the NFL and playing in the perfect offense that any receiver would want to play in. We think about the high-profile and speedy guys that Kansas City has at receiver, but Travis Kelce has been a perennial All-Pro. And as you spoke about it, he reminds a lot of people of Kellen Winslow, formerly of the San Diego Chargers. and also Todd Christensen, who played with the Oakland Raiders.
Yeah, those are good. Well, just one footnote. All this talk about the Chargers, where they're going to be, sometimes it takes a big person to say, I was wrong, and you just fix it. You go back to San Diego. I know there's too much money in the stadium in L.A. and TV contracts. That's not going to happen. But it's happened before. Teams have left cities. We talked about it before. The Baltimore Colts left, Big C. The Houston Oilers left, and the Raiders have left numerous times. And St. Louis Cardinals have left, and the Rams left. And would it make sense to, if you see a problem coming, do you say, let's find a way to get the Chargers back in San Diego? Or is that just fool's gold, Big C? Your thoughts?
I believe it's true goals. Stan Kroenke has a 25-year contract with the Spanos family, Charlton, for the Chargers to be there in Los Angeles in that Inglewood Stadium.
Yeah.
I know it's much to do about talk through the media saying that they got to go to London and they should go back to San Diego. But I think the new digs will make a big difference. A lot of people don't want to sit in that archaic stadium there in Carson, California.
Yeah.
Where in the NFL, because we have so many transplants around the United States of people moving from different areas, Charlton, wherever you go, you're going to have visiting fans in the stands because we no longer just have people staying in an area when they grow up. They move on after they go to college and other things, jobs transfer.
Yeah.
So wherever you go, you're always going to see a large contingency of the visiting fans in the stands. That just happens to be the case when the Chargers play there in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and amazing, too, when you think about fans that, like Pittsburgh came in there, they dominated the crowd down in Carson. The Packers came in and did the same thing. So if you buy a $100 ticket for a game and someone says, hey, here's $400, let me have your ticket, you might just profit $300 and go watch it at a bar. So that's just going to happen. I want to just...
Well, you also get the same thing in Washington, D.C. at FedEx Field.
Yeah.
That's a stadium that holds 78,000 people. And generally, every home game for the Redskins, the opposing team has more fans in the stand than the Redskins.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And they're not talking about going back to the grounds of RFK was located, Big C, different demographics. Something that's coming up sad, too, the NFL schedule this week, it'll start on the West Coast. It's going to end on the West Coast, literally. Thursday night, the Los Angeles Chargers at 4-5. They come into Oakland, and the Raiders are 4-4. It's for a second place in the AFC West. But it's also going to be the last time that the Chargers, with San Diego or LA, will come into the Coliseum in Oakland. It's the last time they'll fly their plane into the Coliseum or at Oakland International and take the little shuttle over to the Coliseum. It's the last time. The next time they play the Raiders on the road is going to be down in Vegas, Big C. I don't think a lot of people, it hasn't really hit home yet, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't know why it would be a reason that it hits home. The Raiders have abandoned Oakland before going to Los Angeles, so they're used to playing in different arenas. But when I look at the matchup in this game, and I think about where the Raiders are being 500 on the season, which no one really expected, and all four of those losses that the Raiders have came to teams with winning records.
Yeah.
So, that speaks well on the building of the Raiders right now. They've gotten more out of this team than what a lot of people expected. The Chargers are a team that started out sluggish. They were a playoff team last year, and there were a lot of expectations. But they would be hit with a lot of early season injuries, Charlton. They lost two of their top secondary players. They lost Ingram, one of their top defensive ends, and Gordon wasn't there. Now they have Ingram and Gordon back, Charlton, and you can see a different spark in the offense with the Chargers as well as on the defensive line. They were consistent pressure on the Green Bay Packers last week, and Aaron Rodgers, he never got comfortable in that game.
Yeah, he never got comfortable, and it's amazing when you just mentioned that the Raiders have done it before. I remember talking to John Vella, who at the time when the Raiders were down in Los Angeles and they were coming back to Oakland, they had played the Oilers at that time, the Houston Oilers, before they went on to Tennessee. And there's so many people that were emotional. Well, now they're doing it again, but they're going out of state, so I know a lot of people have their own feelings. But staying in the Bay Area, Monday night, Big C, you have the Seattle Seahawks flying into San Francisco International or San Jose, whichever they land, and they're 7-2 on the road on the year. They're taking on the San Francisco 49ers that are 8-0 on the season, and this is for supremacy in the NFC West, but it's more than just that. There's a lot of hope that the Chargers, obviously, coming into Oakland, the last time you'll see a team flying into Oakland from the South, from the California market. That we'll see that. But then when you look at the 49ers and the Seahawks, they don't think the Rams are going to make the playoffs this year. It's going to be very difficult. So these are two teams that are going to be perhaps your West Coast teams for the playoffs, being that the Raiders won't get in. Your thoughts?
Well, it would be very tough for the Raiders to get into the playoffs right now, just being a 500 team at this spectrum of the season. But I expect a lot from this game in Seattle, coming to San Francisco. We're really going to test the mettle of the San Francisco 49ers. Everyone has talked about the vaunted defense that they had. Jimmy Garoppolo played his best game of the season last week, but their running game struggled in that essence that Garoppolo was able to play such a great game.
Yeah.
Can they get both of them on the same page against the Seattle Seahawks defense this week? One of the things about the Seahawks offense is that they haven't blown anybody away. All of their games have been by a touchdown or less this year. So their offense, as good as it's been, with Russell Wilson being the second most efficient quarterback in the NFL, has just not gone out and dominated anybody. They've done just enough to win, even though they have 2 losses.
Yeah.
But this is going to be a formidable test for both of these teams, Charlton. Supremacy of the NFC West. Even though if San Francisco loses this game, they'll have a 1-game lead, but they'll have that emotional hit that they would have to take if they lose this game to the Seattle Seahawks.
Give me one feeling here, and not that it matters because players move around all the time. Michael Thomas, he's down there playing back east playing for Baltimore. Think about Richard Sherman had a success when he had Russell Wilson on the other side of the ball. And I know there's a lot of talk about 4th and goal, or actually I think it was 2nd and goal from the 1-yard line, and they did not run beast mode. And that was down against New England. And so there's a lot of talk about who called that play. Pete Carroll fell on the sword and said, well, it was the offensive coordinator called it. But we know a lot of people think it was Wilson. And I don't think Sherman ever forgave him. Not that it matters. Do you see, Sherman's not the same hitching his giddy up anymore. This is a guy that I would think that Wilson would go after, not away from like back in the day. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't know if he ever would have shied away from him at any point, y'all. So Russell Wilson is a consummate pro. He hasn't shied away from any defensive back. If you look at all the games that Seattle has played this year, this guy has led the NFL in touchdown passes. So it's not that he's fearing any secondary or any individual in any secondary around the NFL. The key to the 49ers defense, Charlton, is their pass rush.
Yeah.
Can they get consistent pressure on Russell Wilson? Can they keep him cornered in the pocket? Because we know how well he throws on the run.
Yeah.
This guy is mobile as any quarterback in the NFL. He doesn't look flashy, but he's mobile. And he throws the ball better on the run than any other quarterback.
Yeah.
So it's going to be extra pressure put on the 49ers defensive front, Charlton, just containing Russell Wilson alone.
That's interesting. The Legion of Boom was what the 49ers are emulated, and now Wilson might be able to face the new version of the Legion of Boom. We'll see what happens in San Francisco, Santa Clara coming up on Monday. We talked so much about football and how they're doing it in college football. We talked about originally back in the day, they would pick a national champion, whether it's Associated Press or the coaches poll, and then it went into, and they split a lot of those polls. And then we went into this talk about, playing for the national championship. We got 4 teams in there, and so people can like or not like that situation. College football but they can learn from college basketball. Like in New York City, college basketball rolled out 4 heavyweight games for a kickoff at Madison Square Garden, the doubleheader, and I hope everyone will quit talking about the players getting paid, Big Z. It should have already happened, but I like the way college opened up with mano and mano, as opposed to playing some schools that have no chance of beating you, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, that's what's great about college football and basketball, and I enjoy it so much, is that the heavyweights play each other, Charlton, and it's really decided who are the best teams in the country on the court. It's not always laid out to the posters, because in college football, so many of these teams play teams, Charlton, that shouldn't even be in the stadium with them, but they're making cash games for those visiting teams.
Yeah.
We saw the heavyweights show up last night at Madison Square Garden. You get Michigan State, you get Kansas, you get Duke, and you get Kentucky. So it's battled out on the court, Charlton, who has the most dominant teams in college basketball.
Yep.
And when we look at it overall, 19 of the top 25 teams in college basketball were in action last night.
Yeah.
And that bodes well for the fans. And only 2 of those 19 teams lost, Charlton, when you think about it, and 2 of them were in the top 4.
Yeah, and that's amazing, because I was I mean, you never really care to go watch the college basketball season open up unless it's a top 2 team. But they had, it's almost like the Final Four in reverse. But think about this, given the transient nature, Big C, of the college game, your average New Yorker, they would have a hard time naming 4 or 5 kids who dressed for Duke, who dressed for Kansas, Kentucky, or Michigan State last night. But it was still very, I think it was very gripping basketball. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, that's what college basketball has become. It's become a transient sport because we have so many one-and-dones. Guys don't stick around to get to that maturity factor of their junior and senior years much more in college basketball. But the excitement of the game is there. When we think about how competitive those games were last night, in Duke defeating Kansas 68-66, and, you know, Kentucky defeating number 1 Michigan State by 7.
Yeah.
These are very competitive games, and guys are going to get to the next level.
Yeah.
But what they bring to the floor every night, Charlton, is great competitive attitude.
Yeah, and we're just having a little bit of static with your mic. I know the weather's being what it is, Big C. But give me your thoughts, too, because when I look at Michigan State, remember they had the issue last year with Tom Izzo yelling at one of his players and was really going into him on TV, and a lot of mainstream media defended Izzo, and maybe, you know, that's like Bobby Knight had already set the precedent for how a lot of Big Ten coaches would treat their athletes. And I guess, to me, I think that's going to be different this year. I don't think you're going to see that Bobby Knight mentality, throwing chairs and, you know, poking players in the chest and acting as if he's talking to, you know, some teenager that's doing something wrong. And I want to see that change. Does that matter to you now that we're talking about players being paid? If a guy can get paid on his likeness coming up soon, it doesn't look good if you still have a coach that can poke somebody in the chest, or you know, the way they were doing with Izzo last year. That make any sense, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I grew up in the era when athletes dealt with discipline from their coaches. They were yelled at from their coaches. They were pushed by their coaches. You know, these things happen. This is what sports are all about. I think that a lot of the broadcasts get off kilter, Charlton, because they're concentrating on things other than the game. There are intimate moments in a game where there's a coaching moment, and it's not always appealing to everybody when they're looking at it.
Yeah.
But if you understand athletics is not about kissing your girlfriend. It's a very tough mental and physical nature that you have to run into. That culture of athletics is totally different than what you go through on the street. If you look at football players, they commit assault every play in a game.
Yeah.
But on the street, they can't do what they do at work.
Yeah.
When you look at a coach and how he gets at in his coaching mentality towards players, this is something that's always been the history of games. It's like they delegated a lot of violence out of football, but football is still violent. Coaches have their own coaching tactics. Everybody is different on how they handle it.
Yeah.
Coaches are not there trying to appease the television crowd. They're trying to win games. And players get tough or they leave universities. That's always been the mantra of college athletics.
Let me draw a comparison to, say, a Tom Izzo and a Bobby Knight, to say Coach Krzyzewski, and then the late Jerry Tarkanian. They also won national championships, but they did it with a different kind of mentality. And I just want to get your thoughts. Do you think they're all 4 the same? They've all won championships? Or was there a difference in the way Krzyzewski and the late Jerry Tarkanian handled players and still got a lot out of those players without poking them or thumping them in the chest? Big C, your thoughts?
Charlton, in the era that I grew up with, I saw coaches get into fisticuffs with players. Things are different now because of the multimedia coverage, but coaching has never changed. I mean, all players at some point have been denigrated by a coach. It happens. You either toughen up, you accept it, or you move on.
Yeah.
As a player, you're not sitting there as a coach trying to babysit people.
Right.
I understand that with this new wave of media that you see more than what you saw in the past, but if the cameras focus on the game and got out of the interaction with the coach and the players, because this is one of the reasons why coaches don't allow cameras in the locker room, because there are things that are said in private moments that are kept between the coach and the players. So you don't always talk about this. This is the reason why they have the media segment before or after the game, Charlton.
Yep.
But the emotions of a contest spew out at all different times, and everybody handle it in a different way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to chastise a coach for his teaching methods, because these players know what they sign up for when they go to these various universities.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody has their own opinion about that. It is interesting to see. I don't think a lot of grown men are treated that way, but again, they have their own money and they have their own power. I want to get to something, again, the reason college basketball can play a team that can beat you early on is because they're playing on average about 30 to 35 regular season games, Big C. College football, you're getting 10 to 12 games. But 19 of the top 25 men's college basketball teams, they were in action on opening night, and only number 1 Michigan State and number 3 Kansas lost last night. So could you imagine if they were setting up for like what college football does for the, choosing who gets to go to the play for the college football championship? And basketball, you get chosen also, but you can play your way in whether you're the 1st seed or the 64th seed. And I like the fact that we had 19 of top 25 playing last night. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, what that means, Charlton, was when it comes down to the choosing for the March Madness, they look at strength of schedule just like they do in college football. So you can suffer these early season losses. You can have 3 or 4 losses against ranked opponents, Charlton, but that's going to let the selection committee know, look, they play everybody anytime. They don't back down from anybody. So this is the type of team that we want in the tournament because they're competitive. They're battle tested.
Yeah.
They played the best. So when they play a weaker opponent, Charlton, they should dominate naturally.
Yeah, that's what I love. I just love about the game of sports. You get the chance to play someone who is even considered better than you are, and it's just a matter of how you do in that game that determines if you're going to win or not. I want to get into the world of the NBA, and I know everybody has their opinion, and I really want to get your opinion on this. When it comes to players in load management, I know Kawhi Leonard, the load management comes up. This will be the 2nd time in the first 8 games that he's had a load management and decided not to play. And I don't know if maybe it has happened in the past where Kareem had load management, or Chamberlain had load management, or Russell had load management. Magic Johnson, Dr. J, Larry Bird, those guys. Is load management something new because the money's so great, or is it just that players decide they don't want to play? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, those players you mentioned, Charlton, didn't have load management. They were proud to go out and play a full NBA slate unless they were injured. I look at Kawhi. You're talking about him missing the 2nd game. Kawhi Leonard has missed 26 of the last 92 regular NBA games. So when you talk about load management, I think this is something that's bad for the league, and this is one of the reasons I don't pay a lot of attention to the NBA at this point in the season. If you're talking about load management, and say if you were to translate that into the NFL, players who've had success, they say, okay, Tom Brady, I want to sit out 20% of the games because I've won 6 titles and I'm 42 years of age. How would the NFL fans feel in a visiting stadium with Tom Brady showing up and saying, hey, I'm not even going to dress? Matter of fact, I'm not going to dress. Julian Edelman's not going to dress. Sonny Michel's not going to dress. Our top 3 offensive performers, we're going to sit this one out. So if you look at that in the NFL and you start sitting out the top quarterbacks in the NFL, Russell Wilson doesn't want to play in San Francisco this week.
Right.
Phillip Rivers doesn't want to play. If you look at Kyler Murray not playing, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes saying, I'm tired and I'm going to sit this one out. How would people look at NFL players if they start sitting out a game or 2 here throughout the season because they just wanted to have load management?
Yeah.
And so I think that the NBA players are so arrogant now is that they're adjusting the fans. And this is going to affect them in their pocketbook. Next year, when they start negotiating their new television contract, you're going to have those networks say, hey, it's going to be based on load management. Every time you get a superstar sitting out and our numbers go down, we're going to take that money out of the contract. And so it's going to help the bottom line of the NBA players with this alleged load management that they have.
Isn't that something where you think about, they talk about who's the greatest, and you think about whether it's LeBron James or Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson, Kareem. I still think Wilt Chamberlain was the most dominant. The greatest is always, that's like asking who's the best kisser. Everybody thinks they're the best kisser, Big C. Sam Darnold can attest to that. But, and thinking of kissing, just a footnote, you talk about people not showing up if they know the star player's not going to play. Maybe the home team can get some of that money back, especially if they're not on the injury report. So if you think about it this way, when they talk about fatigue, the Sacramento Kings, they played in India this year against the Indiana Pacers, and now they're playing in Toronto, Canada tonight against the defending NBA champions. If anyone's going to be fatigued, it's from traveling to, even though they haven't had the playoff run that a lot of other teams had. So I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Would you punish teams if a guy's not injured and they're sitting them down to get rid of this load management garbage? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that's something that they're going to have to desperately take a look at, Charlton, because it's unfair to the fans. You're charging fans full price for the ticket, and you're having the players that they're paying for to come see sitting down saying that I'm tired.
Yeah.
And that's something that shouldn't be done. I mean, you look at LeBron James in his 17th year in the NBA. When does LeBron James start talking about load management? Kawhi Leonard is only in his 9th year in the NBA, and he needs load management. He's played half the professional career that LeBron James has, and he set out more games in his career than LeBron James has.
Yeah, and that's what I love to have that conversation, because someone has to fix it. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week around the world on the #1 podcast network in the universe. That's iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Speaker.com. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity Comcast Television. You can also follow on Roku TV launching, and also Amazon TV, Fire TV. But I want to tell you that my favorite app, and I say everyone tell a friend, just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I'll introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing, and I really appreciate the way things are going. So tonight, we talk about load management, and we talk about the Chargers. Should they go back to San Diego? They're not going to London. They're going to go and play that 25-year contract in the Inglewood Stadium, Big C, so we know that's going to happen. But the big thing in L.A., you have the Clippers at home versus the Milwaukee Bucks. No Kawhi Leonard, but then Giannis is in town. If you're in L.A., L.A. is all about name and, King James, and now Anthony Davis is out playing LeBron, so they're saying MVP when he goes to the free throw line. And I think Giannis, there's so much that he has to grow and learn from. I think, and just get your thoughts, we don't know the answer to this, but what does Giannis think when he has a chance to play a guy that he was told by everyone in the universe that shut him down last year? They said, how did Toronto stop Milwaukee? They put Kawhi on Giannis, and now Giannis get a chance to come back and say, wait a minute, give me round two. Would that be some thinking that the Kawhi is going to take the favoritism that he has and say not get shown up by Giannis? Your thoughts?
Well, it really wasn't Kawhi shutting down Giannis last year in that game. It was that triangle defense that they put on Giannis. They realized that Giannis didn't have that jump shot that he could control the game from the outside, and he needed to get in the paint.
Yeah.
And you saw every time that Giannis touched the ball out high, they put a triangle defense on him, made him give up the basketball because they didn't want him around the rim. That was the difference. Kawhi Leonard got credit for it because he was the guy that matched up with it. But if you go back and you look at the game tape, Kawhi got help every time. He wasn't always one-on-one against Giannis because Giannis physically could dominate him in that capacity. He needed help. But in this game tonight, coming in, it's a disparaging thing to the fans. It's not about Kawhi not being in the game and Giannis getting an opportunity. I don't think that NBA players look throughout the season and say that I have to have this particular matchup on this particular night to, show my dominance in the league. You're going to go out every night that you're playing to demonstrate, regardless of who that opposing opponent is, and be the best that you can.
Yeah, what would Billy Crystal do without seeing Kawhi, the LA's second favorite player, it seems? So tonight's Wednesday schedule, on Hump Day, you have New York at Detroit. That's already underway, 7 o'clock East Coast time. You have Washington at Indiana, Chicago at Atlanta. I'm telling you, Atlanta's going to make the playoffs this year in the Eastern Conference. They knocked off San Antonio last year, and they're really playing so well. I think they should start filling that arena down south, Big C. And as a Southern guy, do the Hawks have, the Falcons aren't winning. We know the Braves were in the playoffs. The Hawks, do they get that type of attention that they deserve down south, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, they're still a young, inconsistent team, Charlton. They got to get some consistency. They lost Sean Collins to a 25-game suspension on PEDs. So they're without one of the top scorers from last year. He was the second leading scorer on the team. You look at Trae Young's inconsistency. Last night, he only scored 1 point in the first half, even though he scored 28 in the second half. You can't win consistently if your point guard is only getting 1 point per half.
Yeah, and then Golden State is at Houston. Houston finally gets a chance. I'm not so sure if this new team that passes the ball for Golden State won't suck some people. They might get a win down in Houston. We'll see. They already knocked off Portland at home. Sacramento at Toronto, as we talked about. Minnesota is at Memphis. Orlando's at Dallas. Philadelphia is at Utah. We talked about Milwaukee at the Clippers. This Philadelphia team at Utah, That's going to be a challenge, but they look like they have what it takes to win. But Utah's always tough at home, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Utah, they struggled somewhat at the start of this season. They were the second best team in the West last year, Charlton. They struggled getting off the snide. They're in the middle of the pack. They're going to have to pick it up if they want to keep pace with the two teams in Los Angeles.
Well, there's a lot to be seen in the sports universe. We love bringing it to you. You can follow so many great sports this time of year coming up on this holiday season. Also, Veterans Day coming up on Monday, November 11th. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young men, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, as you say, we're on hump day, and we're the second night this week is college football.
Yeah.
Miami of Ohio at the Ohio University, Charlton. So college football never ends. I'm going to sit back, have me a cold one, and enjoy another college football game.
Well, you can sit back and enjoy it, and we can all enjoy it every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, that's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.